Today's recipe calls for Parmesan rind. We're going to be making homemade minestrone soup. Yes, we're going to test our minestrone soup against the Olive Garden soup, and we're going to see which one is better. I know Olive Garden isn't quite known for their soup, but we're going to crush it anyways. Spoiler alert, you got to watch to the end to see who wins. It's going to be us. So the first thing you're going to do is clean all your vegetables off before we start cutting them for our minestrone soup. We'll start on our onion first. You're going to cut the top off the opposite end of where the root is, where the hairs are. Then just cut your onion straight in half. You want to get it as equal as possible. Then you're going to peel the skin off. You may get the first layer with the skin, which isn't a big deal. You can save all this to make vegetable stock or throw it in your composter if you have one. Now that you have your onion cut in half, you're going to use the tip of your knife and you're going to cut small sections the width of your onion all the way around to the other side. Once you have the sections cut, you're going to turn your onion around and cut the opposite way, making small dices of onion. It's a good rule of thumb to always cut your vegetables into small dice when you're cutting vegetables for soup. This will help ensure that your vegetables will fit on your spoon and nobody has to break their jaw to try to get a spoonful of soup. It's also a good rule of thumb when you're cutting proteins for any soup as well. I forgot to mention, but we're going to use one whole yellow onion for this recipe. Now that you have all of your onion cut, throw it in a bowl and set it aside so we can start cutting the next set of vegetables. Next, we're going to peel 2 medium-sized carrots. You can use 1 large one or 3 to 4 small ones, or use more or less carrots. It's really up to you. You can use these peels for veg stock or also throw those in your composter as well. Now that you have your carrots peeled, you're going to cut both ends off of each carrot. You can save those for veg stock as well if you choose to. Depending on how large your carrot is, you're going to cut those into 3 sections. If you have a smaller one, you can cut that into 2 sections. And each section you're going to cut in half. This makes it a whole lot easier to work with in the next step. This will give the carrot a flat side so it doesn't roll around on the cutting board when you go to cut it. Then again, depending on how large your carrot is, you're going to cut those halves into half again. If you have a really large carrot, you can cut that half into 3s. Or if you have a small carrot, you can leave it as is. Now that you have multiple halves of halves, take your carrot and cut them lengthwise into quarter half moon shapes. Again, we're going for a small dice on all of our vegetables. And when we're cutting all of our vegetables for this recipe, ensure that you're using the claw so you don't get one of those digits. Now that all of your carrots are cut, we'll throw them in a separate bowl on its own so we can move on to cutting the next vegetable. Now that our cutting board is carrot free, you're going to grab 2 medium-sized celery sticks. Again, you can use more or less if you choose to. Then you're going to cut off both ends on each celery stick. Once you have those ends cut off, you're going to cut your celery stick right in half. It's really challenging to cut equal halves on celery. I've never had any luck. Let's see if you can do any better. Once you have 4 celery sticks now, you're going to cut those into a small dice as well. This will help round out our mirepoix, which is carrot, onion, and celery. This is a great starting base for any dish, especially soups. So go ahead and mix your carrots and celery together in the same bowl. Now that all of our celery has been cut, we're going to start on our asparagus. I find it easier to cut off the ends instead of snapping them off one by one. So leave it in the bunch like this with a rubber band and cut them all at one time. Anytime you're working with asparagus, you want to ensure that you do that because the bottoms are unedible because they're so tough and woody. Once you have the bottoms cut off, run through and give everything a small dice, even the top where the spears are. And you want to do your best to cut all of your vegetables in one uniform cut. This will help ensure everything cooks the same and stays tender during the cooking process. Now that you have all of your asparagus small dice, go ahead and throw that in its own separate bowl. Asparagus is a bit more tender than root vegetables like carrot. This means that asparagus takes less time to saute than a tougher root vegetable like carrots. Now that our work surface is clean, we're going to grab a yellow squash and cut the ends off on each side. Once you cut the ends off, you're going to split it right in half. Then we're going to grab a zucchini and cut both ends off as well, and also cut our zucchini in half. Once you have halves, you're going to cut the half into 3 small sections. It's basically the same method we used when we cut our carrots. Then cut those into a small dice as well. If you have a large zucchini or a large squash, you can cut that into fourths instead of thirds. We're going to use 1 whole zucchini and 1 whole yellow squash. Again, depending on how much you want, you can decide what to use and how much of it. With a softer vegetable like this, when we go to boil it for a long period of time, it will shrink a little bit in our pot. Not shrink so much like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids small, but it'll shrink a little bit. So if you don't have uniform cuts, you can get away with this one, since they will wither away and shrink up in our pot. But again, do your best to get uniform cuts on everything. It's good practice, and it'll make you a better cook in the end. Next, we're going to cut our yellow squash the same exact way. It makes it a little bit tougher to get uniform cuts on yellow squash, just because it usually has an odd shape to it. You can cut the neck off because it usually tapers from small to big. So if you cut the neck off and cut the main body in 3s, and then cut the neck, the smaller part, into 2s, and then small dice it from there. But I just wanged it and kept it whole and small diced the entire thing all at one time. Now that we got our zook and squash all cut, we're going to smash 5 garlic cloves. Don't Hulk smash them, just smash them enough to make it easier to peel. Now that you have all of your garlic peeled, you're going to cut the top and bottom off. Go ahead and throw that away. You don't want to keep that for your vegetable stock. Now that you have all of your garlic cloves cleaned up, we're going to thinly slice our garlic. This will make the next step a lot easier. If you don't feel comfortable with doing this, you can go ahead and smash them really well, like Hulk smash, for the next step. It'll all make more sense here in a second. Now that you have all of your garlic thinly sliced or Hulk smashed, we're going to go ahead and mince our garlic. So with one hand on your handle and the other hand on the top of the blade towards the tip, you're going to rock your knife back and forth. Your knife should be really sharp, so you shouldn't have to apply very much pressure. Just rock the knife back and forth, mincing your garlic into really tiny, small pieces. Now that all of your garlic has been nicely minced, throw it in its own separate bowl. We throw in our garlic last because minced garlic like this has a tendency to burn quickly, and if we burn our garlic, our soup will come out bitter, and that's not what we want. Yes, this is going to be a lot of dishes, so hire a dishwasher just to make this recipe. Now that we have all of our vegetables cut for our soup, in a large soup pan, you're going to add 1 tablespoon of cooking oil and turn your heat up to about medium. Now that our oil is hot, we're going to add our small diced onion. We're going to saute our onion until everything is translucent, about 3 to 4 minutes, and hit it with a nice pinch of salt. Give it a quick stir to coat all of our onion in oil to ensure that we get a nice even cook on everything, and to help distribute the salt that we just added. Now that our onions are translucent, we'll go ahead and add our celery and carrots to our pot. We're going to cook these until our carrots and celery start to turn tender, so about 4 to 5 minutes. Don't worry about cooking them all the way through. They will cook the rest of the way when we simmer our soup. Now that our carrots have had time to saute and sweat out a bit, we'll add our asparagus, then add another pinch of salt and give that a quick stir to help distribute the salt throughout our pot. We want to keep the asparagus nice and tender, so we'll cook this for about 2 to 3 minutes. Now that our asparagus has had a few minutes to saute and sweat out, we'll go ahead and add our garlic and ensure that you scrape the holding apparatus. We don't want to miss any of that delicious garlic. We're going to saute our garlic until it becomes nice and fragrant in smell. Once it becomes fragrant, then we know it's done. After everything has become nice and fragrant, we're going to add our zucchini and our squash. This is a softer vegetable, so we're going to add it at the very end, because if you add it too soon, it'll turn into mush immediately. So give this a quick stir and cook it about 2 to 3 minutes tops. The zucchini and squash will release a lot of water compared to our other vegetables, which is a good thing. It adds more flavor to the pot. Next, we're going to add one 16-ounce can of rinsed white beans and one 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes. You can use roasted tomatoes for more flavor if you choose to. Then give everything a nice stir to incorporate all the flavors before we add our vegetable stock. Next, we're going to add 6 cups of vegetable stock, 4 cups in this holding apparatus, and a container of vegetable stock is about 4 cups itself. Then you can use the vegetable stock to rinse your can of tomatoes to get some of that extra tomato juice out of there, and then pour some for the homies. Now that you've added all your vegetable stock, go ahead and throw in a bouquet of rosemary, thyme, and sage. It's best if you tie it together with some butcher's twine. Unfortunately, I don't have any. Rookie mistake, I know. Then you're going to add in your Parmesan rind. This is the same Parmesan rind from our Rigatoni Alla Vodka recipe. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. It's delicious. Then bring your soup to a simmer over medium heat. We're going to simmer for 20 minutes. This will help bring all of the flavors together. Next, bring a medium-sized pot of water to a boil. This will be for our pasta, so go ahead and season it really well with salt. I use 2 cups of ditalini. You can use 2 cups of mini shells or any other kind of pasta you choose. We cooked the pasta separate from the soup because we wanted to keep our pasta nice and al dente to give us another texture to the soup. Once you've drained your pasta, hit it with a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil and give it a nice stir to coat all of the pasta so it doesn't stick together. So when we go to plate, we don't get one giant una noodle in our soup. After it's simmered for 20 minutes, go ahead and pull out your bouquet of herbs and your Parmesan rind. I recommend not throwing your Parmesan rind right away in the trash can. It may melt the bag. Next, give your soup a taste. You might have to blow on it for like 30 minutes because it is going to be hot. Then after that, we'll adjust the seasoning as needed with some salt and fresh ground pepper. This is what the Garden of Olives soup looks like. Yikes. Alright, before we try our soup, let's try Olive Gardens first. The texture's pretty flat all the way across. There's not a lot of tenderness to the vegetables at all. It's pretty much mush. Not a whole lot of flavor. Just tastes like tomato. So if you love tomato soup, this is perfect for you. There's really not a whole lot going on for it. It's pretty flat, kind of salty. It's just not very good. Now for the main event, grab your favorite soup bowl and throw in about 2 spoonfuls worth of pasta on the bottom of your bowl. You don't have to put the noodles on the bottom. This is just the way I know how to do it, or like to do it. Then we'll ladle our soup right over the top of that. If you go pasta first, then soup, or pasta, then soup, no matter which way you do it, just give everything a nice stir together before you go to eat it, so you get a nice mouthful of all of your vegetables and the noodles. And of course, we gotta have the bread on the side. Next, we're gonna garnish with some freshly grated Parmesan Reggiano. Again, this is the same parm from our Rigatoni Alla Vodka. It's important to cross-utilize as many ingredients as you possibly can. It'll make you a better cook in the end, and you won't waste any ingredients. Alright, let's give our soup a try now. There's nice texture to it. The noodles are nice and al dente. And then the vegetables are nice and tender. And then we get a nice flavor from all the herbs we added to it. And it has the slightest bit of tomato flavor. It's not too much, it's not overpowering. Then the Parmesan cheese rounds it out with that nuttiness and the cheesiness. Overall, it's just way better than the other one. Alright, that's it for this video. This recipe is so much better than theirs. Once you learn to make this, you won't go back because it's that delicious. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a like. And also find me on Instagram at TaylorMakes92. I'm going to go back to Olive Garden and see if I can exchange this minestrone soup, maybe for a handful of those Andy's mints. Man, those things are delicious. So we'll see you on the next one. Quite known for their minestrone, but we're going to test it anyways and we're going to beat them. Alright, let's try this again. I forgot to turn my mic on. I'm going to be full before I even try mine. Alright, that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it.